I'm Miranda, 34 years old. Growing up in a family that valued appearances over authenticity shaped my understanding of love. I became a successful financial advisor through my own hard work, something my mother and sister Cynthia never appreciated. When I discovered they were hosting an expensive Mother's Day lunch without me, I decided to show up anyway. I never expected Mom to greet me with, "Don't touch the food, just drink water, your sister paid $3,000. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me for more real-life stories that might just change how you view family relationships. I grew up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb outside Boston where my parents maintained a carefully crafted image of the perfect family. My father James was a corporate attorney who spent more time at the office than at home. My mother Diana was a former beauty queen who channeled her unfulfilled ambitions through her daughters. But there was always a clear hierarchy in our home. Cynthia, my sister, 3 years my senior, was the golden child while I remained in the shadows. From my earliest memories, the favoritism was unmistakable. When Cynthia performed in dance recitals, my mother would spend weeks preparing her costume, attending every rehearsal, and inviting everyone she knew to attend. When I joined the debate team and qualified for state championships, my mother claimed she was too busy with Cynthia's activities to come watch. "Maybe next time, Miranda," she would say, but next time never came. The pattern continued throughout my childhood. When I was 12, my birthday party was abruptly canceled because Cynthia had an unexpected dance competition. "Your friends will understand," my mother assured me, though the disappointment on my face was evident. "Cynthia needs this opportunity. You can have cake another day." That other day never materialized, and I spent my 12th birthday alone in my room while my parents cheered for my sister across town. High school brought more of the same. Despite maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA, my achievements were always secondary to Cynthia's. When I was named valedictorian of my class, my parents missed my speech because Cynthia had a minor role in a community theater production scheduled for the same evening. "We've already seen you speak at debate competitions," my father reasoned, as if that made their absence less painful. The most hurtful moment came when I received a full scholarship to Northwestern University. After years of working part-time jobs and staying up late to maintain my grades, I had earned admission to my dream school without needing a penny from my parents. Instead of pride, my mother's response was concern for Cynthia's feelings. "Maybe you shouldn't mention the scholarship around your sister," she suggested. "She's sensitive about not getting into her top choice schools." The truth was that Cynthia had decent grades, but had relied on our parents' connections and money rather than putting in the work herself. She attended a private college where my parents paid full tuition, yet somehow this was deemed more impressive than my scholarship. Throughout college, I supported myself entirely. While other students had parents who helped with living expenses or visited on weekends, I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore and another 10 hours tutoring fellow students. During holidays, I often couldn't afford the flight home, so I stayed in nearly empty dorms picking up extra shifts to save money. None of this garnered respect from my family. When I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and economics, my parents attended but spent most of the day fretting about Cynthia's recent breakup with her boyfriend. At the post-graduation dinner that I paid for with my first signing bonus, my mother spent 30 minutes showing relatives pictures of Cynthia's study abroad semester in Paris. After college, I secured a position at a respected investment firm in Boston. I worked 70-hour weeks, built a client base from scratch, and established a reputation for solid, ethical financial advice. By 28, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest condominium in Cambridge. When I invited my family to my housewarming, my mother walked through my new home with barely concealed disappointment. "It's cozy," she said, which in her vocabulary meant small and unimpressive. "Cynthia's looking at houses in Beacon Hill. Of course, your father and I are helping with the down payment. You know how property values appreciate in that neighborhood." I wasn't surprised. My parents had always provided financial support to Cynthia while expecting me to fend for myself. What I didn't know then was that they had taken the education fund my grandparents had set up for both of us and given Cynthia my portion as well. This revelation would come years later and shake the already fragile foundation of our relationship. As the years passed, I found success on my own terms. I was promoted to senior financial advisor, developed a specialized practice, helping women achieve financial independence, and even gave occasional guest lectures at my alma mater. The emotional distance between my family and me grew wider with each passing year. Our interactions became limited to major holidays and the occasional family event, each one more tense than the last. Thankfully, I wasn't completely alone. During my second year at the firm, I met Jasmine, a brilliant tax attorney who became my closest friend. Unlike my blood relations, Jasmine celebrated my successes and supported me through difficulties. She understood the complicated dynamics of my family because she had similar experiences with her own. "Family should lift you up, not tear you down," she would remind me when I returned from particularly difficult family gatherings. Then there was Ronnie, my African gray parrot. He had belonged to an elderly client who passed away and left specific instructions that Ronnie should go to that nice financial advisor who always takes time to talk to my bird. Ronnie was 10 years old when he came to live with me, already equipped with an extensive vocabulary and an uncanny ability to mimic human speech at the most opportune moments. Ronnie became my unlikely confidant. He would listen to my frustrated rants about family dynamics after difficult phone calls, occasionally interjecting with phrases like, "That's ridiculous," or "You deserve better," that he had picked up from my conversations with Jasmine. His most frequent utterance, "Call the lawyer," came from my discussions with Jasmine about various client situations, but it seemed Ronnie understood it as a solution to many of life's problems. Between Jasmine's unwavering friendship and Ronnie's comical commentary, I built a support system that helped me navigate the complicated emotions surrounding my family relationships. Little did I know how crucial that support would become in the months ahead, when long simmering tensions would finally boil over in a very public way. 6 months before the Mother's Day incident, I made what would become my final attempt at genuine reconciliation with my family. My parents had invited me to dinner at their home to celebrate Cynthia's newest business venture, a luxury boutique in an upscale shopping district. Despite my reservations, I accepted the invitation, hoping that perhaps time had softened some of our familial tensions. The evening began as most family gatherings did, with my mother fawning over Cynthia while barely acknowledging my presence. My father offered a perfunctory hug before retreating behind his newspaper. I had brought an expensive bottle of wine selected specifically to pair with the meal my mother had mentioned preparing. She accepted it with a cursory thank you before placing it in the cabinet, opting instead to open a bottle Cynthia had brought. "Cynthia has developed such an exquisite palate since opening the boutique," my mother explained, as if wine selection was somehow related to selling overpriced designer clothing. During dinner, the conversation revolved exclusively around Cynthia's boutique. She described her carefully curated inventory, the exclusive designers she had convinced to let her carry their lines, and the influential clients who had already made purchases. But as she spoke, I noticed inconsistencies in her business model that raised red flags in my financially trained mind. "So you've invested over $200,000 in inventory before establishing regular clientele?" I asked during a pause in the conversation. Cynthia's smile faltered slightly. "You have to spend money to make money, Miranda. Not everything is about pinching pennies." "I'm not suggesting penny pinching," I clarified. "But cash flow is the biggest challenge for new retail businesses. Have you created financial projections for the first year?" My mother interrupted before Cynthia could respond. "Miranda, not everyone needs to overthink everything like you do. Cynthia has a natural instinct for business." Despite my better judgment, I persisted. "I'd be happy to review your business plan, Cynthia. The first year is crucial, and I've helped several boutique startups navigate those waters." "Are you suggesting my business plan isn't solid?" Cynthia's tone had turned defensive. "Not at all," I assured her. "I'm offering to help. Financial advisory is literally my profession." Well, some of us have creativity and vision, not just spreadsheets and calculators, Cynthia snapped. Not everything is about the bottom line. My father finally looked up from his plate. Girls, please. Can we have one dinner without this tension? My mother predictably took Cynthia's side. Miranda, your sister has worked very hard on this boutique. The least you could do is be supportive instead of immediately looking for problems. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had come with the intention of improving our relationship. You're right. I apologize if my questions came across as criticism. I'm genuinely interested in your success, Cynthia. The rest of the evening passed with surface-level conversation. I asked appropriate questions about the boutique's location and target demographic, offering congratulations when expected. Before leaving, I hugged my sister and sincerely wished her well with the new venture. If you ever want to talk business strategy, just call me, I offered. Thanks, but I've got it handled, she replied with a dismissive smile. What I didn't know that night was that Cynthia's business was already in serious financial trouble. She had overextended herself with the initial inventory purchase, signed an expensive lease in a premium location, and had yet to establish sufficient sales to cover her monthly expenses. These facts would become relevant much sooner than I expected. 3 weeks after that dinner, I was reviewing my credit card statement when I noticed several large charges I didn't recognize. There were multiple purchases from designer wholesalers, totaling over $15,000. I immediately called the credit card company to report potential fraud. The customer service representative informed me that the card had been used in person with the correct PIN. Furthermore, the shipping address for the purchases was my sister's boutique. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. Cynthia had somehow obtained my credit card information and was using it to fund her struggling business. I called Cynthia immediately, hoping there was some explanation other than the obvious. "Oh, that," she said casually when I confronted her. "I was going to tell you about that. I just needed to secure some inventory before it sold out, and my business credit line isn't established yet." "You committed credit card fraud, Cynthia," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "You stole from me." "Don't be so dramatic," she replied. "It's not stealing when it's family. I was going to pay you back once the item sold." "How did you even get my card information?" I demanded. "You left your wallet on the counter when you went to the bathroom at dinner," she admitted without a hint of remorse. "I just took a picture of the card. The PIN was easy enough to guess. You always use the same 4 digits. I was speechless at the casual way she admitted to this violation. "This is illegal, Cynthia. You understand that, right? God, Miranda, why are you always so rigid? This is why no one wants you around. You make everything into such a big deal. Just let me keep the inventory, and I'll pay you back in installments." "No," I said firmly. "I'm calling the credit card company back to report this as fraud. Those charges are being reversed." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "If you do that, you'll destroy my business before it even gets off the ground. Mom and Dad will never forgive you." "This isn't about Mom and Dad. This is about you stealing $15,000 from me." I ended the call and immediately reported the fraud to my credit card company. I explained that I knew who had made the unauthorized charges but wanted them reversed. The representative asked if I wanted to press criminal charges against the person who had used my card. After a moment's hesitation, I declined. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to have my own sister arrested. That decision, made out of lingering family loyalty, would prove to be a mistake. The credit card company reversed the charges, meaning the vendors would be seeking payment from Cynthia. Within days, my parents called more angry than I had ever heard them. "How could you do this to your sister?" my mother demanded. "She was just getting her business established, and now you've ruined everything." "She stole my credit card information and charged $15,000 without my permission," I replied, stunned by their reaction. "How am I the villain here?" "Family helps family," my father joined in. "If she needed inventory for the store, you should have helped her. You've always been so selfish with your money." "Selfish, I worked for every dollar I have. No one ever helped me. and now I'm selfish for not wanting to be the victim of literal theft. She would have paid you back, my mother insisted. Now the vendors are demanding payment and she doesn't have the capital. If her boutique fails, it will be entirely your fault. After that conversation, communication with my family became even more strained. Weeks passed with only terse text messages exchanged. As Mother's Day approached, I assumed I would receive the customary invitation to the annual celebration my mother cherished. Year after year, no matter our disagreements, we gathered at an upscale restaurant for an elaborate Mother's Day lunch. But the invitation never came. A week before Mother's Day, I saw my mother's social media post a reservation confirmation from Le Cygne, the most exclusive French restaurant in Boston, with the caption, "Looking forward to a special Mother's Day celebration with my beloved daughter." Daughter. Singular. Not daughters. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar ache of exclusion. After all these years, it still had the power to hurt me. I called Jasmine immediately. "They're having Mother's Day lunch without me," I said when she answered. "At Le Cygne of all places." "Are you sure you weren't invited?" Jasmine asked gently. "Maybe the invitation got lost, or your mom assumed you knew." The post specifically mentioned daughter, not daughters, and no one has contacted me about it. Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "Nothing, I guess, except that they've finally made their preference official." Or, Jasmine suggested, you could show up anyway. What? No. That would be incredibly awkward. Maybe it's time for awkward Miranda. You've spent your entire life accepting their treatment. Maybe it's time they face the consequences of their actions. I considered her words. I don't know. Crashing Mother's Day lunch seems pretty dramatic. Sometimes dramatic is necessary to break unhealthy patterns, Jasmine replied. Just think about it. After we hung up, I found myself researching Le Cygne online. The prix-fixe Mother's Day menu was $300 per person, not including wine pairings or the restaurant's famous supplemental courses like their beluga caviar service. A celebration there could easily exceed $3,000. Given Cynthia's recent financial difficulties and my parents' comfortable but not extravagant retirement income, I wondered how they were financing such an elaborate celebration. A suspicion began to form in my mind. I checked my recent credit card statements again, looking for any unfamiliar charges. Nothing unusual appeared, but that didn't mean Cynthia hadn't found another way to access my finances. I made a mental note to keep my banking app accessible during the weekend just in case. After a restless night contemplating Jasmine's suggestion, I made my decision. I would attend the Mother's Day lunch, invited or not. If nothing else, I deserved an explanation for why I had been excluded from a family tradition. What I couldn't anticipate was just how pivotal that decision would become in redefining my relationship with my family forever. Le Cygne occupied the ground floor of a historic building in Boston's Back Bay, its elegant facade distinguished by arched windows and a discreet gold plaque bearing the restaurant's name. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, casting a warm glow over white tablecloths and antique French furnishings. It was exactly the type of setting my mother adored, exclusive, expensive, and impressive to mention in conversations. I had chosen my outfit with meticulous care that morning, a navy blue silk dress that conveyed professional success without appearing flashy, paired with the pearl earrings my grandfather had given me before he passed away. My hair was styled in loose waves, and I had applied makeup with a precision that armor plating would envy. If I was walking into battle, I would do so looking my absolute best. The drive to the restaurant was a blur of rehearsed conversations and second-guessing. Several times I nearly turned around. What did I hope to accomplish by showing up uninvited? Would this improve anything, or merely deepen the divide? But whenever doubt crept in, I reminded myself of years of exclusion and dismissal. At the very least, I deserved to know why this time was different. At exactly 1 o'clock, I handed my car keys to the valet and walked through the ornate doors of Le Cygne. The maitre d' greeted me with practiced hospitality. "I'm joining the Lawson party," I said, using my family's surname with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Of course, Ms. Lawson. They're already seated in the garden room. Please follow me. As we wound through the restaurant, my heart pounded so loudly I was certain other diners could hear it. The garden room was a beautiful solarium at the back of the restaurant where natural light streamed through a glass ceiling onto lush potted plants and fresh flowers adorning each table. My family was seated at the largest table in the center of the room, champagne flutes already in hand. The maitre d' stepped aside and 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My mother and father, my sister Cynthia, and my mother's 2 sisters, my aunts Patricia and Eleanor. Their expressions ranged from shock to displeasure with not a hint of welcome among them. My mother recovered first. "Miranda," she said, her voice sharp despite the public setting, "what are you doing here?" I summoned my most pleasant smile. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I wouldn't miss our family tradition." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The maitre d', sensing tension, quietly slipped away. "We weren't expecting you," my father finally said, his discomfort evident. "Clearly," I replied, still standing beside the table. "Was my invitation lost in the mail?" Cynthia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Don't be passive-aggressive, Miranda. After what you did to my business, did you really expect to be included?" My Aunt Patricia, always the peacemaker, gestured to an empty chair. "Well, you're here now. Sit down, dear." As I moved toward the chair, my mother's next words stopped me cold. "Don't touch the food. Just drink water. Your sister paid $3,000 for this meal." The deliberate cruelty of the statement hung in the air. I remained standing, stunned by the public humiliation. Cynthia smirked, adding fuel to the fire. "Beluga caviar isn't for people like you." "People like me," I repeated, struggling to maintain my composure. "People who don't understand family loyalty," she clarified, taking a deliberate sip of champagne. My aunts exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing. My father studied his menu with sudden intense interest. Not one person at the table came to my defense. I slowly pulled out the chair and sat down, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. A waiter appeared almost immediately, his professional demeanor slightly strained as he picked up on the tension. "Would Madame care for champagne?" he asked. Before I could answer, my mother interjected. "Just water for her." The waiter hesitated, looking to me for confirmation. I nodded, slightly unwilling to create a scene with the staff. He filled my water glass and retreated quickly. As I sat in silence, an unsettling thought occurred to me. If Cynthia was struggling financially, as I knew she was, how had she managed to pay $3,000 for this extravagant meal? My suspicion from earlier returned stronger now. Under the table, I discreetly opened my banking app and checked my recent transactions. There it was, a charge for $3,214.75 from Le Cine restaurant posted that morning. Cynthia hadn't paid for this meal. I had. I took a slow sip of water, processing this information, while the others at the table deliberately carried on conversation without including me. Cynthia had somehow accessed my financial information again and was now openly gloating about spending my money while simultaneously excluding me from the meal I was financing. The audacity was breathtaking. In that moment, I made a decision. I would remain calm, gather evidence, and plan my response carefully. If my sister wanted to play games with my money, she would soon learn that I was not a willing participant. The appetizers arrived with impressive theatrical flair, each plate a miniature work of art. Thin slices of truffle crowned delicate mushroom tarts. Tiny quail eggs nestled in beds of microgreens. And the centerpiece, a mother-of-pearl dish, holding glistening black beluga caviar, accompanied by traditional garnishes and warm blini. I sat silently sipping water, watching as my family members exclaimed over each course. My mother appeared to have forgotten my presence entirely, lavishing praise on Cynthia for arranging such a spectacular celebration. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," she gushed, patting Cynthia's hand. "This is the most thoughtful Mother's Day gift." Cynthia beamed. Only the best for you, Mom. I wanted today to be special. And how is the boutique doing? My Aunt Eleanor asked. Diana tells me you've had quite the turnaround. Oh, yes, Cynthia replied confidently. After a brief adjustment period, we're seeing substantial growth. I've secured exclusive contracts with several European designers, and we're developing a loyal clientele of high net worth customers. I bit my tongue knowing that her adjustment period had involved attempting to defraud me of $15,000. Her description of the business contradicted everything I knew about retail economics and her actual situation. That's wonderful, Eleanor said. It must be such a relief after those initial challenges. Miranda, my Aunt Patricia, suddenly addressed me, perhaps feeling guilty about my exclusion. How is your work going? Still at the same investment firm? Before I could answer, Cynthia interrupted. Patricia, you don't want to get her started on financial advising. Miranda thinks spreadsheets count as meaningful conversation. My mother laughed. Oh, you know Miranda and her numbers. So serious all the time. Actually, I began determined to speak, despite their attempts to silence me. I recently was named head of our firm's Women's Financial Independence Initiative. We're helping women, particularly those leaving difficult marriages or family situations, establish financial security and, speaking of travel, my mother cut in, turning to Cynthia. Tell everyone about your plans for Santorini this summer. The abrupt subject change was so obvious that even my father looked uncomfortable. I returned to my water, silently observing as Cynthia detailed an elaborate Greek island vacation that sounded far beyond her means given her business struggles. While the main courses were being served, I discreetly texted my bank to confirm the transaction details from Lacine. The response came quickly. The charge had been made using my card information, but processed as card not present, meaning Cynthia had used my card number without having the physical card. The transaction had been authorized that morning at 9:17 a.m. As I processed this information, my anger built beneath a carefully maintained facade of calm. This wasn't an impulsive mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern of deliberate financial abuse. When Cynthia excused herself to visit the restroom, I waited a few moments before following. I found her applying lipstick at the marble vanity. Enjoying your water? She asked snidely when she saw me in the mirror. I held up my phone displaying the transaction details. I'm curious about something, Cynthia. How did you manage to pay for this extravagant lunch when your boutique is struggling? Her expression flickered briefly before regaining its confidence. What are you talking about? This charge from Lacine for $3,214.75 that hit my account this morning. The one you're currently taking credit for. Oh, that, she shrugged, returning to her lipstick application. You can afford it. Stop being so selfish. This is theft, Cynthia. Again, after I explicitly warned you about using my card without permission. It's Mother's Day, she replied, as if that explained everything. Someone had to make it special for Mom. And that someone had to be me without my knowledge or consent. You've always been so stingy with your money. Mom said I deserve it more than you do anyway. At least I know how to create beautiful experiences while you hoard your money like some kind of dragon. The casual revelation that my mother had encouraged this theft stunned me momentarily. This isn't about being stingy. This is about basic respect and legality. I'm calling the bank as soon as I return to the table to report this as fraud. Cynthia's confident expression faltered. You wouldn't dare. Not in the middle of Mother's Day lunch. Watch me, I replied, turning to leave. And Cynthia, this is the last time you'll have access to any of my financial information. Go ahead, she called after me. Report it. You'll just prove to everyone what we already know, that you care more about money than family. Mom will never forgive you for ruining today. I returned to the table, my decision made. As dessert was being served, an elaborate chocolate and gold leaf creation that undoubtedly carried a hefty supplemental charge, I discreetly placed a call to my credit card company. Yes, I'm reporting a fraudulent charge, I said, clearly making no attempt to hide my conversation. The transaction at La Signa restaurant in Boston this morning was unauthorized. 5 pairs of eyes snapped to me, conversations halting mid-sentence. Yes, I understand the restaurant will be notified immediately that the payment has been declined, I continued. Yes, I want to proceed with the fraud claim. Cynthia's face drained of color. My mother's expression transformed from shock to fury. Miranda, what are you doing? She hissed. I ended the call and placed my phone on the table, ensuring that Cynthia faces the consequences of her actions for once. It's Mother's Day, my mother said, as if I had somehow forgotten. How could you do this now? How could Cynthia steal my credit card information again after I explicitly warned her about the legal consequences? I countered. How could you sit here and praise her for spending my money without my consent? It's a family celebration, my father interjected weakly. Surely we can discuss this privately later. Like we discussed it privately after she charged $15,000 to my card for her boutique, I asked. Oh, wait, we didn't discuss it. You all attacked me for reporting the fraud and expected me to absorb the loss to protect Cynthia from consequences. My Aunt Eleanor looked confused. Cynthia used your credit card without permission. Twice now, I confirmed. Once for boutique inventory, and now for this lunch where I was explicitly told not to eat the food that I was unknowingly paying for. A flash of understanding crossed Eleanor's face, followed by disapproval that for once wasn't directed at me. Miranda is exaggerating, my mother insisted. Cynthia was going to pay her back. With what money, Mom? Her boutique is failing. She couldn't secure business credit because her personal credit is already maxed out. Where exactly was this repayment coming from? Cynthia stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. You've always been jealous of me, Miranda. Always trying to make me look bad because you're bitter about your own sad, lonely life. Before I could respond, our waiter approached the table with a concerned expression. Excuse me, Ms. Lawson, he addressed Cynthia. There seems to be an issue with the payment method on file. The card has been declined due to a fraud alert. The manager of La Signa approached our table with professional concern etched on his face. He was a slim man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the poised demeanor of someone accustomed to handling delicate situations among wealthy clientele. Is there a problem with the payment, madam? He asked Cynthia directly, having identified her as the person who had made the reservation. Cynthia's composure crumbled visibly. There's been a misunderstanding. My sister, she gestured accusingly toward me, has canceled the payment method out of spite. All eyes at the table turned to me. My mother's gaze was particularly venomous. I canceled a fraudulent charge, I clarified calmly. I did not authorize the use of my credit card for this lunch. In fact, I was explicitly uninvited from this gathering. The manager's carefully neutral expression flickered with confusion. I see. Perhaps we could discuss this matter privately. There's nothing to discuss, my mother interrupted. Miranda is just being difficult as usual. She's trying to embarrass us. Actually, I addressed the manager directly. My sister obtained my credit card information without my permission and used it to pay for this meal. I've reported it to my bank as fraud, which is why the payment was declined. This is a family matter. My father attempted to intervene, his voice low with embarrassment. We can sort this out ourselves. The manager nodded diplomatically. Of course. However, we do need to resolve the payment situation. The total for the meal thus far is $3,214.75, which I will not be paying, I stated firmly, as I was specifically told upon arrival that I was not welcome to partake in the food, only to drink water because my sister paid $3,000 for this meal. My Aunt Patricia gasped softly at the repetition of my mother's cruel greeting. Cynthia turned to our mother, panic evident in her eyes. Mom, can you cover this? I'll pay you back next week when some outstanding invoices come in. My mother's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. I don't have that kind of money with me, darling. We thought you had handled the payment. Dad, Cynthia turned desperately to our father. He shifted uncomfortably. Cynthia, that's more than our monthly mortgage. I don't have that much available on short notice. The reality of the situation was dawning on everyone at the table. Cynthia had committed fraud, counting on me not to discover it or not to challenge it publicly. Now faced with the consequences, she had no backup plan. As the uncomfortable standoff continued, my phone rang. The screen displayed the name of Jasmine's assistant who was watching Ronnie for the day. "Excuse me," I said, grateful for the interruption. "I need to take this." I stepped away from the table to answer the call. "Miranda," the assistant said, sounding concerned, "I'm sorry to bother you, but Ronnie seems unwell. He's not eating and he's been unusually quiet, except for occasional agitated squawking. I think he might need his medication." Ronnie had a chronic respiratory condition that occasionally flared up under stress. I kept his medication at home, but hadn't anticipated needing it today. "I'll come right away," I promised. "Try to keep him calm until I get there." In the background, I could hear Ronnie's distinctive squawk, followed by one of his favorite phrases, "Call the lawyer, call the lawyer." The parrot's timing was impeccable. As I ended the call, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue this painful confrontation with my family, or I could use Ronnie's situation as an excuse to exit with dignity. More importantly, I needed to decide whether to press formal charges against Cynthia for credit card fraud. Jasmine, who was not just my friend, but also a talented attorney, had advised me after the first incident that I should report Cynthia to the police. "Identity theft between family members is still identity theft," she had said, "and letting her get away with it once only encourages her to do it again." How right she had been. I returned to the table where the manager was discreetly waiting for a resolution to the payment situation. "I have an emergency at home," I announced. "My pet is ill and needs medication." "How convenient," Cynthia muttered. I ignored her and addressed the manager directly. "I will not be paying for this meal." The credit card used was obtained and used fraudulently. I've already reported this to my bank and provided them with documentation. If necessary, I can provide you with the fraud case number. The manager nodded solemnly. "I understand, Ms. Lawson. However, someone will need to cover the cost of the meal consumed." I turned to my family. "I suggest you all determine how to divide the bill. I'm sure between the four of you you can manage it." My mother's face flushed with anger. "You would leave us with this bill today of all days? The same way you left me with $15,000 in fraudulent charges 6 months ago? Yes, I would." I gathered my purse and stood. "And one more thing. I've considered this carefully and I've decided to press formal charges against Cynthia for credit card fraud. Both incidents will be included in my police report." A stunned silence fell over the table. My announcement had clearly shocked everyone, particularly Cynthia, whose smug expression transformed into one of genuine fear. "You're ruining this family," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "How could you do this to your own sister?" "I didn't ruin anything, Mom. I'm simply refusing to be the victim of theft by my own family members." I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. For years, I've accepted being treated as less valuable, less worthy of love and support. I've watched you give Cynthia everything while expecting me to fend for myself. I've forgiven countless slights and deliberate exclusions. I've made excuses for your behavior, blamed myself, and tried desperately to earn the love that should have been freely given. My voice grew stronger as years of suppressed hurt and anger found release. I worked through college without family support. I built my career from nothing. I purchased my home without help from anyone. I established myself as a respected professional through hard work and ethical behavior. And throughout all of that, not once did either of you express genuine pride or support. My father finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Miranda, that's not fair. We've always..." "Always what, Dad? Always assumed I was fine because I didn't ask for help. Always compared me unfavorably to Cynthia. Always expected me to be the bigger person when she behaved badly." I turned back to my mother. "Did you know that when Grandpa died, he left an education fund to be split equally between Cynthia and me? But somehow, all of that money went to Cynthia's private college tuition while I worked 20 hours a week to support myself through school on scholarship. My mother's expression confirmed what I had suspected. This wasn't news to her. "You knew," I realized aloud. "You and Dad took my portion of that money and gave it to Cynthia, didn't you?" "Your sister needed it more," my mother replied defensively. "You had your scholarship. You were always so independent." "Independent by necessity, not by choice," I corrected her. "I would have loved support from my parents. I would have treasured not having to work through college, to have had time for a normal social life, to have graduated without exhaustion etched into every memory." Cynthia, surprisingly, was the one who broke. "You think I don't know how capable you are? How effortlessly you succeed at everything? Do you have any idea what it's like living in the shadow of perfect Miranda, the straight-A student, the scholarship winner, the financial genius? I've spent my entire life trying to measure up to you. Measure up to me. Mom and Dad have supported every endeavor you've ever undertaken financially and emotionally. They've bailed you out of every mistake, praised your mediocre achievements, as if they were exceptional, and consistently chosen your needs over mine. How exactly am I the one casting a shadow?" The truth hung heavy in the air between us. For the first time, I saw something like understanding dawn on my father's face, though my mother remained resolute in her denial. "I have to go," I said finally. "But before I do, you all have a choice to make. Either Cynthia can confess to the fraud, return every dollar she's stolen from me, and agree to financial counseling, or I will proceed with formal charges. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide." As I turned to leave, I paused, removed a sealed envelope from my purse, and placed it on my mother's seat. "Happy Mother's Day," I said quietly before walking away. The drive home was both heart-wrenching and strangely liberating. Tears streamed down my face as I navigated the familiar streets, the weight of what had just transpired settling heavily on my shoulders. I had finally spoken my truth after decades of silent acquiescence. There was no going back now. When I arrived at my condominium, Jasmine's assistant was waiting anxiously by the door. "Ronnie's in his cage," she explained as I entered. "He seemed really agitated about an hour ago, but he's calmer now. Still not eating, though." I thanked her and went straight to Ronnie's large cage in the corner of my living room. The African gray parrot was perched quietly, his feathers slightly ruffled, a sign of discomfort. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, opening the cage door. "Not feeling well?" At the sound of my voice, Ronnie perked up slightly. "Miranda home," he said, one of the first phrases he had learned after coming to live with me. I gently coaxed him onto my hand and carried him to the kitchen where I kept his medication. As I prepared the dropper with his prescribed dose, Ronnie watched me intently. "Call the lawyer," he squawked suddenly, his voice stronger than I expected given his condition. Despite everything, I smiled. "Already happening, Ronnie. Already happening." After administering his medication and ensuring he had fresh water and his favorite treats, I settled on the couch with Ronnie perched beside me. The emotional exhaustion of the day hit me all at once, and I allowed myself to finally break down completely. I cried for the little girl who had never understood why her mother's love seemed conditional. I cried for the teenager who had achieved academic excellence only to have it dismissed. I cried for the young woman who had worked herself to exhaustion, believing that if she just accomplished enough, her family would finally see her worth. Most of all, I cried for the adult who had continued to seek approval from people fundamentally incapable of giving it. My phone buzzed repeatedly as messages flooded in. My mother, my father, even my aunts were texting their messages, ranging from angry accusations to confused questions. I silenced the notifications without reading them. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow. Instead, I called Jasmine, who answered on the first ring. "I did it," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "I confronted them." "Oh, Miranda, how did it go?" I recounted the entire confrontation, from my mother's cold greeting to Cynthia's theft to my final ultimatum. "I'm proud of you," Jasmine said when I finished. That took incredible courage. I don't feel courageous, I admitted. I feel shattered. That's normal. You've just confronted a lifetime of emotional abuse. It would be strange if you weren't emotionally drained. What if I've made a mistake? What if pressing charges against Cynthia really does destroy the family? Jasmine's response was characteristically direct. First, you haven't actually filed charges yet, just threatened to. Second, any family that can be destroyed by one member standing up against theft and emotional abuse isn't much of a family to begin with. Her words resonated with a truth I was only beginning to accept. I left a letter, I told her, on Mom's seat before I walked out. What did it say? Everything I've never had the courage to say before, including the fact that I've been making anonymous contributions to their retirement fund for the past 5 years. Jasmine gasped. You what, Miranda? You never told me that. It was true. I had never shared with anyone, not even Jasmine, that I had been quietly transferring $5,000 annually into a trust that supplemented my parents' retirement income. They had made some poor investment decisions in their later working years, and I had discovered their financial vulnerability during a routine review of publicly available property tax information. Rather than confront them directly, which I knew would hurt their pride and likely be rejected, I had established the trust through my firm, structured to appear as returns on an investment they had made decades earlier. They had accepted the unexpected windfall without question, never suspecting it came from the daughter they had consistently undervalued. The letter explains that I'm dissolving the trust, I continued. They'll still have the principal that's accumulated, but the annual contributions will stop. How much have you given them over the years? About $75,000, including investment growth. Jasmine was silent for a moment. And they never knew it was from you. No, I thought if I supported them quietly, somehow it would balance the scales. That I would feel better about our relationship knowing I was caring for them, even if they couldn't care properly for me. I laughed bitterly. Pretty pathetic, right? Not pathetic, Jasmine corrected gently. Human. We all want our parents' approval, especially when we've been denied it. You were trying to create connection in the only way you thought was available to you. As we talked, Ronnie began to show signs of improvement, nibbling at the treats I had placed near him and occasionally interjecting with fragments of phrases he had picked up over the years. When I finally ended the call with Jasmine, promising to keep her updated, I felt marginally more centered. I checked my phone again and was stunned to see 47 missed calls from various family members. The first had come just 30 minutes after I left the restaurant, likely when they discovered the contents of my letter. They had continued steadily throughout the afternoon and evening, growing more frequent as time passed. I wasn't ready to listen to the voicemails or read the texts. Whatever crisis my revelations had precipitated would still be there in the morning. Tonight I needed rest and distance from the emotional battlefield I had just left. As I prepared for bed, Ronnie safely settled in his cage with his medication taking effect. I felt an unfamiliar sensation beneath the pain and exhaustion. It took me a moment to identify it: relief. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my complete truth to my family. I had named the inequity, refused to accept further mistreatment, and set clear boundaries. Whatever came next would undoubtedly be difficult, but I would face it standing in my truth, rather than contorting myself to earn love that should have been freely given. That realization, painful though it was, felt like the first step on a path toward genuine healing. 6 months passed. 6 months of therapy, boundary setting, difficult conversations, and gradual healing. 6 months of rebuilding my life on my own terms, with relationships based on mutual respect, rather than obligation or perpetual power imbalances. The immediate aftermath of the Mother's Day confrontation had been as chaotic as the 47 missed calls suggested. My mother had alternated between rage and tearful manipulation, leaving voicemails that ranged from threats, "You'll regret this for the rest of your life," to guilt trips, "How could you abandon your family after all we've done for you?" Cynthia's messages had been similarly erratic. Initial threats and insults, gave way to desperate pleas as the reality of potential legal consequences sank in. My father's communication was more measured but equally revealing of the family dynamics. He attempted to position himself as the reasonable mediator, though his primary concern remained protecting my mother and sister from consequences rather than acknowledging the legitimacy of my grievances. I maintained my position. Cynthia would need to repay every dollar she had fraudulently charged to my accounts, agree to financial counseling, and provide a genuine apology acknowledging the theft. My parents would need to recognize their role in enabling her behavior and commit to more equitable treatment if they wanted me in their lives. Initially, they balked at these conditions. My mother dismissed them as excessive and vindictive. Cynthia claimed repayment was impossible given her financial situation. My father asked if we couldn't just move forward without dwelling on the past. I held firm. With Jasmine's support, I drafted a formal legal letter outlining the evidence of fraud and the steps required to avoid criminal charges. I blocked their numbers temporarily to create space for my own healing, instructing them to communicate through my attorney if they wished to resolve the situation. For 2 weeks, silence. Then, surprisingly, it was my father who reached out first, following the proper channels through Jasmine. He requested a meeting, just the two of us. Over coffee at a neutral location, my father revealed something I hadn't expected. He had started seeing a therapist himself. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Mother's Day," he admitted, looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "About the kind of father I've been. The kind of husband, too." He explained that for decades, he had abdicated his parental responsibilities to my mother, finding it easier to focus on his career than navigate the emotional complexities of family life. He had recognized my mother's favoritism towards Cynthia, but had convinced himself it wasn't his place to interfere. "I told myself you were strong, that you didn't need my advocacy," he said, his voice thick with regret. "The truth is, I was a coward. It was easier to let your mother handle everything, even when I disagreed with her decisions." His honesty was unexpected and, I had to admit, somewhat disarming. For the first time, my father was speaking to me as an equal, acknowledging his failures without excuses or deflection. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness," he continued. "I know I haven't earned that, but I want you to know that I'm trying to understand how we got here, and I'm committed to doing better whether or not you decide to maintain a relationship with me." It was the most authentic conversation we had ever shared. I didn't make any promises that day, but I did agree to occasional communication as he continued his therapeutic work. It was a tentative first step toward a potentially healthier relationship. My mother took longer to come around. The revelation about the trust I had established for their retirement had hit her particularly hard. The letter I left had detailed not just the financial support I had provided, but the emotional toll of her consistent favoritism and dismissal of my achievements. According to my father, she had initially refused to believe the trust had come from me, convinced it must be a mistake or an exaggeration. When financial documentation confirmed the truth, she had cycled through denial, anger, and eventually a reluctant recognition that perhaps she didn't know her younger daughter as well as she thought. 3 months after Mother's Day, she requested a meeting with a family therapist present. Though skeptical, I agreed, setting clear boundaries about what I would and would not discuss. The session was tense and uncomfortable. My mother struggled to acknowledge her role in our dysfunctional family dynamic, frequently falling back on justifications and revisionist history. "We always supported both our girls," she insisted, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary. When the therapist gently challenged her, pointing out specific instances I had shared, my mother's carefully maintained facade began to crack. "I didn't think Miranda needed as much," she finally admitted. "Cynthia was always so fragile, so dependent. Miranda seemed fine on her own." "Did you ever ask me if I was fine?" I questioned. "Or did you just assume because I didn't fall apart publicly that I didn't need support?" She had no answer for that, but her silence was more honest than any words could have been. Progress with my mother was slow and inconsistent. Some days she seemed genuinely interested in building a healthier relationship. Other days, she retreated into familiar patterns of martyrdom and favoritism. I maintained firm boundaries, limiting our interaction to what I could manage emotionally and always enforcing consequences when she crossed lines. Cynthia's situation resolved more definitively. Faced with the choice between a repayment plan or criminal charges, she finally accepted responsibility for her actions. A court-mandated financial counseling program revealed the extent of her financial mismanagement and underlying issues with entitlement and impulsivity. To her credit, Cynthia committed to the program fully. She downsized her boutique to a more sustainable model, worked with a business advisor to create realistic financial projections, and began making monthly payments toward the money she had stolen from me. Our relationship remained distant but civil, with clear boundaries and expectations on both sides. As for me, the journey of the past 6 months had been transformative. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process decades of family dynamics and develop healthier patterns for future relationships. I set clearer boundaries in all areas of my life, not just with family. I deepened friendships with people who respected and valued me, creating a chosen family that provided the unconditional support my biological family had not. Ronnie thrived as well. His respiratory condition improved with consistent medication and reduced stress in our home environment. He expanded his vocabulary impressively, though "call the lawyer" remained a favorite phrase, now joined by "boundaries are healthy" and "Miranda deserves better." Phrases he had picked up from my conversations with Jasmine and other friends who frequently visited. My career continued to flourish. The Women's Financial Independence Initiative I led gained national attention, and I was invited to speak at several conferences about helping women establish financial security after leaving toxic relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me that my personal experience had deepened my professional expertise in ways I couldn't have anticipated. 6 months after Mother's Day, I moved into a new home, a decision that felt deeply symbolic. The 2-bedroom condominium had served me well, but the Victorian townhouse in Cambridge represented a fresh start. With high ceilings, abundant natural light, and a small garden where I could enjoy morning coffee, it embodied the space, both physical and emotional, that I had created for myself. My father helped with the move, another small step in our evolving relationship. He had maintained his therapy, joined a men's support group, and begun the difficult work of establishing more independence from my mother's controlling influence. We weren't close yet, but we were building something new on more solid ground. My mother and Cynthia attended a small housewarming gathering I hosted their first time in my new space. The visit was brief and slightly awkward, but notably free from the cutting remarks and dismissive attitudes that had characterized our previous interactions. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. As I settled into my new home and new boundaries, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of familial rejection and favoritism had shaped me in ways both challenging and ultimately empowering. I had learned to validate myself rather than seeking external approval. I had discovered the strength to speak truth to power, even when that power was wielded by those who should have been my greatest advocates. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't defined solely by blood, but by respect, support, and genuine care. The friends who had stood by me throughout this process, who had validated my experiences and celebrated my boundaries, were as much my family as those who shared my DNA. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Relationships with my parents and sister would likely always require careful navigation and firm boundaries. There would be setbacks and disagreements, moments of connection and periods of distance. But for the first time, I was approaching those relationships from a position of strength, rather than need of choice, rather than obligation. As I sat in my new garden with Ronnie perched nearby and Jasmine sipping tea across from me, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey toward healing wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be completely, but I was no longer defined by what my family had withheld. Instead, I was building a life rich with authentic connections, professional fulfillment, and the quiet joy of self-acceptance. "You know," Jasmine said, interrupting my thoughts, A year ago, I don't think you would have believed this was possible. What, standing up to my family? No, being this content in the aftermath. You were so afraid of losing them completely that you accepted crumbs of affection rather than demanding the feast you deserved. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. The irony is that by being willing to lose them, I've created the possibility of having healthier relationships with them. Not perfect, but better. And discovered that your world doesn't end without their approval, she added. That might be the most important lesson of all. I agreed. Ronnie, sensing the importance of the moment, bobbed his head enthusiastically. Miranda deserves better, he declared. Jasmine and I laughed, the sound carrying through the garden on the gentle autumn breeze. In that laughter was the lightness of authenticity, the freedom of self-worth no longer tethered to external validation. If you're watching this and struggling with family dynamics that diminish rather than elevate, you know that you deserve relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the courage to stand in your truth? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to require that your relationships honor your worth.